Okay, so
Is it the full screen or is it just?
it is a full screen for them.
Very cool.
So thank you for having us. And you know how in these kind of like presentations, you always say like, this is a work in progress as a way to say, you know, we're still working what's happening here. Well, this is actually a work in progress. And this is the first iteration of a conversation that Adam and I have been having for a while now. Because Adam has been working with drones for a while, but I've been interested in photography and video. And so we're putting together all ideas around this idea. And as you can see, there are like 3 keywords today: drone, Anthropocene. It's the 2 that you will probably be familiar with. But the idea is that this presentation we will present a third, and that's going to be the core of our presentation, the idea of the meso. And yeah, so just keep going.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about some different technologies that inhabit this environment we call the meso, right? So kite photography, pigeon cameras, Nadar's balloons, and now drone-enabled artists and scientists. Each of these players inhabit a meso level of the atmosphere, the observable yet uncanny space of gases and gazing under 500 meters above the Earth in the lower troposphere. We're flirting with calling it the Anthroposphere.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of ours has called it the Nephosphere. We're just talking about that low level of the troposphere here. The meso, as a visual domain, is situated between objectifying distanciation and subjectification, within which the human has difficulty escaping. Meso means middle. With its middling meaning, it is synonymous with medium, and its plural media. Thus, from the meso, the drone mediates between other scales, between technologies, and betwixt species, including artists, scientists, and whales in our context. The atmosphere also mediates, suspending and pushing along the drone, enhancing its speed and mobility, enabling its vertical vision. Specifically, the meso mediates the democratization or the commoning of the atmosphere in acts of scientific artistry.
Keep going.
Let me keep going, okay. More existentially, it is the meso that is all around us, oxygen-breathing organisms, providing the malleable space for movement. Yet it remains a novelty for volumetric 3-dimensional movement. The meso-layer gases evolve in interaction with the biosphere, the living Earth surface, the hydrosphere, namely the ocean, as well as the higher elevation atmospheric levels. The oxygen in the meso is the result of the exhaust of the terrestrial and oceanic plant kingdom. Our human mobility in this space is a result of our evolution on this high gravity, high oxygen globe. Our flying, floating, and motile technologies evolved to exploit the lift and suspension of this thin atmospheric level, itself a result of the interactions with the earth, sea, and other elementally entangled species, such as humans and whales. This is our shared space where the atmospheric Anthropocene occurs.
So scientific and artistic explorations of the Earth and its organisms, anthropogenics, and geological formations from the meso level have received little attention in scholarly literature despite its proliferation. There is a long history of aerial photography that has been widely documented, and some important work, both artistic and scientific, is actively incorporating this approach. These aerial photographers have helped in paving a visual culture in which the commercial drone imagery can be located. While massive and successful long-scale projects such as Jan Arthus Bertrand's From Above, this is part of the series of From Above, has been widely exhibited, and books and exhibitions everywhere, etc. A number of contemporary photographers are using this vertical view from the meso level and their affordances of scale and perspective to reflect on issues equally large in scale, from war to humanity at large, from the environment to geology. So for example, we have the work of Sophie Risselberg, Fate in Kuwait, in which images resembling wounds and scars on skin are indeed Earth's surfaces torn by bombs and missiles. Other examples include Richard Mench's series On the Beach, in which the photographer shows the isolation and the scale of the human body in the ocean, or Jeffrey Mainstein's view of the cities as patterns, particularly his series Flying, in which he photographs airports from the air, showing them as extracted strategians on the ground. A similar approach found in Alex McLean or Christopher Gillen's images and Gilles Price series Morar Olympiada. Now, particularly important for our point are the works of David Maisel, especially his series Black Maps and Desolated Deserts, work that in his own works reveal the physical impact of activities such as mining, logging, urban sprawl, and military testing.
Right, and this connects with some of our recent work during the quarantine, exploring open pit mines with drones in New South Wales, and the earlier work that I did mapping the information infrastructure in the North Atlantic. This is from the Faroe Islands.
Now, the point of view of these photographers is reproduced constantly in amateur drone photography. One particularly clear example of this crossover is the work of Edgar Burtynsky that, while presented as artistic, have indeed a scientific aim. His most known project is precisely called Anthropocene.
Right, and no species better embodies the Anthropocene and our range of possible responses than the whale, the cetacean. These cetaceans are in peril, and their extinction is a later mark of the Anthropocene. The Atlantic gray whale is extinct, the Chinese river dolphin is extinct, the vaquita porpoise is on the brink, so too is the Maui dolphin. As massive organisms near the surface of translucent ocean waters, because of their mammalian oxygen breathing, the whale is particularly susceptible to scientific visual documentation. Visual attempts to monitor and indeed manage their endangerment are attempted from the macro satellite view as well as the microscopic, but the most transformative perspective occurs at the meso level. That this is also the height preferred by drone wildlife artists is no coincidence, but rather a feature of Anthropocenic vision, which integrates intimate non-human proximity with graphic human-centric scale in aesthetic and scientific spectacle. So as a quick comparative offering, consider the macro vision of the whale. Here, Google Earth satellite images are analyzed by convolutional neural networks in attempts to quantify migration. These whales are positioned in their global context, mass migrating or mass dying in Anthropocenic seas. The great distance, however, renders the whale anonymous, with the proximities between them and the imagining scientists far out in space. Intimacies decrease as signals bounce from base station to satellite, through undersea fiber optical cable systems to alphabet data centers and eventually to office space monitors. Resolution may increase and is certainly available for some, but the embodied hapticality of drone piloting in the meso produces the physicality these images omit. Before considering the meso further, let's briefly dwell on the atmospheric micro. Drones also generate micro whale perceptions of a changing ocean. In whale hotspots like the Sea of Cortez, Patagonia, and the Bering Sea of Alaska, scientists listen for whale breathing and then watch for their distinctive spray refracting in the sunlight. Identifying this, they travel in high-speed boats towards the whales, deploy a drone covered with petri dishes into the meso, and direct it toward the whale's mystified breath. In this interspecies choreography of attunement and touch, if this multi-species choreography is successful, whale microbiota is collected, frozen on board, and delivered to laboratories for PCR analysis to ascertain the microbiotic DNA, often tainted by human sewage microbes and strange breath fellows from Antarctic ponds. Quick little example from professor at the University of Macquarie, Vanessa Perota, here in Sydney. All of this is made possible by on-drone cameras that relay information about the whale, the drone's position, to the piloting scientists. When this whale snot is analyzed, and it rarely is, the microbes are rendered into numbers, DNA sequences representing species, abstracting the locating but visually abstracted whale and human pilot from Anthropocene forces. I got more going on?
Yeah, yeah. Just keep going with the scientific thing. So we argue that between the convolutional neural networks of satellite images
and the numeric microscopy of whale bacteria lies a medial space for envisioning the Anthropocene and multi-species futures within it. So here's just a quick impression of some of this meso drone science work. Drone vision from the meso is resulting in new data, including infrared thermography of humpbacks in Cook's Island.
Details about gray whale behavior in Oregon.
The body condition and energy reserves of whales, and the automated identification of whales based on drone images with convolutional neural networks, not from satellites, but drone images. These examples mediate between subjectivities, species, and scales, bringing humans, whales into contact while remaining in touch with human effects. Mesovision reveals anthropogenics while indexing a human relative visual grammar. The meso is an elemental mediator that translates between not only humans and whales, but also scientists and artists.
So while the use of the meso by science is widely explored, at least in the case of whales, there is also an emerging meso whale art exhibits and art science interface emerging in the meso. Whales are often winners in the nature category of drone photography awards, for example, along with flamingos for some reason. The images are often very similar, presenting the full body of the whale or the whales against saturated blue color, feeding, nurturing, being playful or in danger, and provide an intimate yet distant glimpse into their oceanic life world. So we're interested in why these images are remarkably similar to those produced by the scientific realm. We preliminarily suggest that the art science interface accessed by commercial drones represent the latest iteration of photo technologies, opening perhaps a sixth moment of photographic history that is having a cross-disciplinary impact across art and science. So while mobile phones afforded portability, mobility, and computational rendering, image processing, and connectivity as part of a single device, commercial drones, in many cases connected to mobile phones actually, are able to extend the verticality of the image production while opening the meso level as a way of seeing for amateurs, scientists, and artists alike. While these collectives use drone imagery for different purposes and with different goals, the meso view allows us to see our human selves in the picture, observing or environment with non-human and elemental others, opening the possibility for the Anthropocene to be visually rendered.
All right, we conclude by showing some of our recent drone work with humpback whales off the coast of Sydney. Much research has focused on the drone as a cultural object of war and surveillance. In this presentation, we focus instead on the grounded practices of image collecting afforded by commercial drones in the development of an aerial visual culture in the zone we call the meso. While we are not neglecting drones' origins in warfare, widely discussed and documented, including from an artistic perspective, what we suggest here is aligning, at least to test its limits, the vision afforded by the drone as the latest iteration in the history of personal computing, photography, and media in general, and its dual and simultaneous impact in science and art of the sea. With the aesthetic similarities in image-making processes and the use of these images in scientific research and art, drone views provide a fertile ground that is particularly suitable for empirically visualizing the Anthropocene. Whether images, scientific, artistic, or otherwise, have the capacity to instigate a rejection or reversal of the Anthropocene, what Bernard Stiegler calls the neg-Anthropocene, is another question entirely.
Thank you.
Thank you.